With us, live with us now is Annette Arreola. She's live at Caltech, and from what I told Annette, you have a special guest, huh?
Yes, we certainly do, Michael. Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. We have Dr. Alan Husker over here with Caltech. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the epicenter of where this quake took place in the fault. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it was right near Malibu, and so it was on a coastal fault right there in the transverse ranges, we call them. And they're called the transverse ranges because they run east-west, whereas most of the faults in California tend to run more north-south.
So folks across the Southland, as far east, where do you think they felt it, given the magnitude?
So it was a magnitude 4.6, I forgot to mention that, and it was a little bit deeper here. It was about 13 kilometers deep, or, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles deep. If we take a look at our map we have back here, we have these outlines of how far away it was felt. It was felt quite far away, all through LA, and so millions of people felt this event because LA is so populated. So, it was quite widely felt.
Doctor, we were just talking about the aftershocks. We've had close to 20 of them, or a little over 20 of them.
Right.
Could this be a foreshock?
Yeah, it could be a foreshock. That's always a possibility. However, it's unlikely. It would be only about 10% of the time that we expect something like that. It's a very low probability, so people shouldn't get too nervous, but always be prepared for an earthquake. We live in earthquake country, and it's a good idea to always remember.
In terms of activity and what could people expect in the next coming hours or throughout the rest of the day, what can you tell folks?
Yeah, there'll be still other aftershocks they're going to feel, especially the people closer to the epicenter than Malibu, Santa Monica, Thousand Oaks. They'll probably be feeling things a bit more further away because as time progresses, there'll be smaller and smaller aftershocks and fewer aftershocks. So people farther away probably won't feel any of these aftershocks, but yeah, certainly close in, they might feel about a few of these bumps. But, they should be smaller and nothing really to worry about.
And a lot of things that were running through people's mind is also those apps that we have on our phones that alert us to quakes. Many people who have those apps say they didn't register anything at all. Nothing came through, no alert, no nothing. How do you explain that?
Yeah, so the apps, the way they're set up is to alert for if there's danger. And so really light or weak shaking, really there's no danger. It's really set for if there's higher shaking. And actually there's debates that go on internally, like where that level should actually be set exactly for, really if it's only going to be, really dangerous or just alert people generally. And we don't want to alert people too much because you can imagine somebody's driving in their car and really there's no danger and suddenly they get alerted and, they have an accident on the freeway. We don't want to have that happen either. And so we need to find the right level of how to alert people. And so if they didn't get that alert, it means that there wasn't really high shaking expected. It might be like a weaker level, but not that really high shaking that would cause, some damage.
Over the past couple of days, we have had significant amount of rainfall. We know that our hillsides can become unstable, and now with the seismic activity, what can you tell us about that?
That's a really good question. So this is one of the secondary effects of earthquakes is that you can have landslides and things. This is a smaller earthquake, so let's not get too worked up about it. But certainly that is something that can happen if you have a larger earthquake and rain and whatnot. So it's something to consider.
And talk to us about the aftershocks. What range have they been in?
So they're all smaller so far than the magnitude 4.6. The largest so far has been a magnitude 3, and all the rest have been smaller. So the magnitude 3 was probably felt by a lot of people as well, but then all the smaller ones is, less and less people will feel those. And
we know that Hawaii just had a quake out there. A lot of folks are wondering if there is any correlation, anything to what we felt just before 2 o'clock out here in the Southland.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is no relation, is the gist of it. So it was really far away. It was more than 100 kilometers away. It's very, very far from between here and Hawaii. And the magnitude in Hawaii, again, wasn't like a mega quake. We're still talking magnitude 5.7. So it was small enough that really should be no effect here in Southern California. We're far enough away. The way that earthquakes happen, there's a random distribution across the Earth, and so randomly they're going to happen close in time to each other occasionally, and so this just happens.
I guess right now, what should folks do? What should they should be on the lookout for? What can they do at this very moment?
Think about the next one, I guess. It's unlikely that there's going to be other things happening around this particular earthquake, but just remember we live in earthquake country. It's always good to be prepared. One big tip that Lucy Jones likes to give everyone is to know your neighbors, and I certainly think that's true. One of the great things is after a big earthquake, it's good to know your neighbors, and it's great to get to know them. beforehand, because that's in a community we're more resilient, and so it's if you have something that water is out of your house, maybe your neighbor has water, and so we can share resources, and that's always a great way to prepare as well.
And Doctor, talk to us about the fault itself. How active is this fault here that lies somewhere between Thousand Oaks and the Malibu area?
That's a great question. So those faults in general, there's a series of faults. It's not just one fault that are active in general. It's hard to place it on one particular fault right now. We have different guesses so far as to the different faults it could be on. I saw one that was the Santa Monica fault. Another one was I think it was the East Malibu fault. And so there's a couple of possibilities there. I'm not sure what the latest is. I'd have to go back and check. But the point isn't the exact fault necessarily. It's like that whole transverse range just has a series of faults. And not too long ago, there was the Ojai earthquake. That was a few months ago. Remember, that was a little bit further inland, but it was kind of in the same area. And so this whole zone is in this zone where they can experience earthquakes.
Any concern that this was very close to the ocean shoreline?
That's a good question. If it was offshore, there's some faults a little bit farther offshore that could potentially cause a tsunami if it was big enough. Historically, there was a tsunami, but it's been so long. This is, however, not one we have to worry about in that case. It was onshore, so there's no threat of a tsunami. And also has to be the right type of earthquake for it to be a tsunami. I don't think we have to worry in this case.
Other folks were referencing to date, February 9th, the Silmar quake, I believe, a couple decades ago. Can you talk about any correlation from that or anything from that date now from what we were seeing in today's quake?
Yeah, there's no correlation. Just we have had so many earthquakes. Inevitably, they're going to start falling on the same date as previous earthquakes. And so that's just kind of to be expected. After a while, we start seeing more and more earthquakes. And just remember historically when they occur, and they're just going to add up, basically. There's only so many days in a year.
Of course. And from now, what do you guys monitor? What are you guys looking at? What are you guys seeing?
Well, just in the room behind your cameraman over there, we have our data analysts, and they're hard at work looking at all the aftershocks that are coming through. Most of those aftershocks are really tiny. It can be below magnitude 1, and so nobody feels them, but we still have to catalog them all. And so they're busy with that burst of activity that they have to deal with. But it's not, it's not a safety thing. It's more just cataloging so we know what's happening and analyzing everything.
And speaking of bursts of activity, when you see those aftershocks, is there anything in particular about them that catches your eye, or one particular one that kind of alerts you to something else?
Not so much that alerts us, but we use actually the aftershocks to map the fault surface. So the aftershocks all occur along that fault, and so especially for the bigger earthquakes, you can actually see the aftershocks line up exactly right across that fault, and so we can use it to really define where the fault is.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Allen. We really appreciate it. We'll have much more coming up. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.